Hi everyone, my name is Melissa from Inspire Me ASAP. Welcome to Melissa's Monday mini lesson. Today I'm so excited to share with you a video about a topic that I'm passionate about, and that is student-led conferences. I have implemented student-led conferences in my own second and third grade classroom for the past 4 years with a lot of success and great feedback from administration, students, and the families of my students. In today's video, I'm going to share with you 6 steps that you can take to implement student-led conferences in your own primary classroom. When I first began thinking about a different format or a different approach to the traditional parent-teacher conference, it was back in 2015. And at the time, I was the only teacher in my building who was doing something like this. I talked to other teachers on my grade level. Hey guys, this is the idea I have. You want to join me? Come on, let's do this. And to be honest, my friends, you know who you are, my grade level team, they wanted nothing to do with it. They said, good luck, go for it, we support you, but they just were not ready to try this type of format. So with that being in mind, I was kind of on my own. I knew I needed to get the support of my building administration, their permission, but hopefully their support. So I met with my building principal and I explained the reasoning for why I wanted to implement this new format for student-led conferences in my classroom. I explained how I really wanted my students to take ownership over their behavior, over their academics, and most importantly, I wanted them to take ownership over their learning. And the way that I was holding conferences with just the parents, I wasn't seeing that. And so I really was reflecting and wanting to change things. My principal, turns out, was in full support of what I wanted to do, gave me his blessings, and with that, I was so excited to really start planning what this would look like in my third grade classroom at the time. One of the first things that I needed to do once I got the support excuse me, and permission from my principal was create a schedule that I sent out to families. So before I created the schedule, I sent home a note that would explain, just a basic note that explained what student-led conferences were, what it looked like, and the reason why I was using this approach with the students. And then the family signed up for a 30-minute block of time where that best fit their schedule of when they wanted to come in with their child. And I know that, when I'm saying 30-minute block of time, you're probably having some questions about that. Like, is that too long, or is that, too little? Like, that sounds kind of crazy. I'm used to a 10-15-minute conference. And so I will have another video after this one kind of addressing and pinpointing those actual questions that you might have. But for today's video, I'm going to try to stay focused on just how you can start to implement this in 6 steps or less. So once I had the feedback from my parents about when their preference was for a time, I then created a small group conference format schedule. And in my district, we had conferences on Thursday night and then Friday morning. So I had 6 different blocks of time where I had a group of students and their families, about 4 or 5 at a time, come during that block of time, come during that 30 minutes. Once I had a schedule set into place, I then started to plan what I wanted to have my students do when they rotated through the different stations or rotated through the different rotations. So I have with you some things I want to share that my students have used in the past. And this is just to give you ideas and to inspire you to try to think about what you can do with your students in your classroom based on the subjects and the grade level that you teach. Some of you are departmentalized. I have done this with my second and third grade students, and I've changed it up quite a bit depending on the type of students or the grade level that I had at the time, but then also what I knew what I knew as a teacher worked best for them. So with that being said, I just have some examples of what I can share with you for some of the different rotations. One thing that I wanted my students to do was share with their parents some of the things that we've been doing in reading. So they had at their desk their book nook, and they went through all of the different books that they were checking out from the classroom library. They talked about using the classroom library. They talked about their reading notebook and explained the different pages that they had in their reader's notebook. And then in their reading folder, they had some reading passages that they shared with their mom or dad. So one of the first things that they did during the reading station was to introduce the book nook and to talk about some of the books that they were reading in class with the teacher or, independently. Some students also really liked showing their mom and dad some of the anchor charts and bulletin boards that we had up. So this would be more of the springtime type of activity, is when I would implement book clubs with my students. So I had a lot of friends who wanted to walk their mom and dad over to a bulletin board and share, like, hey, this is what we're doing in my book club, and this is what we're learning about how to be, how to hold a conversation about a book and stay on topic with a few of my friends. Other ideas might be to have some projects that you've been working on. So if we were, for example, reading about Charlotte's Web and we were identifying different character traits of Charlotte, then the students would share their work with their family about what they did during reading for the past week or two or so. Another idea is to have a rotation for, what do I have here? Science. I have in the past created a book about the planets where I integrate science, the planets, solar system, and then writing. And so we make informational text about the different planets, and then they write facts about it. So this is something that in the past my students have shared with their families, and it's something that they're really proud of. It's something that they love to share. For social studies, at the fall conferences, we talk a lot about citizenship and what it is to be a good role model. And so in the past, my students have again went to that bulletin board and said, here's my project, here's what we're learning about in social studies. We're learning about role models, and guess what, Mom? You're my role model, and I wrote about you. And so then they would read what they wrote about their mom, who was there at the time, for their social studies project. A couple of other rotations or stations that I had, other than, math and the content stations, would be I'll hold off for that one, the treats. It would be a goal setting, where a goal setting station where students would self-reflect about their own behavior and characteristics that affected learning. So prior to the student-led conferences, I had my students fill out a self-reflection. And then as a group, so with their parents' support, they would create a goal for that quarter based on some of the things that they knew that they needed to work on the self-reflection. And so it was really powerful to have the parents there working and talking, having that conversation with the child to be able to really make a realistic goal that they could improve, whether it was behavior, academics, social, emotional, whatever the goal was. That was the goal setting station. And then last but not least, and I say last and you'll see why, last but not least, I have the treat station. So once my students went to all the different content related, academic related rotations, and they shared what they wanted to share with their mom and dad, they then went to the treat station where I had basically $10 that I spent at Walmart to just purchase some cookies and just some punch and just some fun things that they can munch on to really celebrate their learning and what they just accomplished through the student-led conference, because it is a big accomplishment once they are finished with, sharing all these things with their mom and dad. And of course, yes, that is their favorite rotation, but let's be real, it would be everyone's favorite rotation, mine included. Moving on, number 4 would be to practice with your students. Practice to have success. So now that you know, okay, here's the different rotations and here's some things that, here's some projects or activities that I want my students to share with their families, then your job would be to practice. Set aside some time to practice with your students, to have your students practice what they are going to say. What are they going to do as soon as they walk in? Because this is most likely going to be new for, if you think about it, it might be new for you, it might be new for the students, and it might be new to the families, to their mom and dad. So if they walk in and everyone's just kind of looking around, that's a little bit awkward. You will want to prepare and have your students know exactly what to do when they walk in for their small group format conference. In my own experience, what I found to be successful is I have my students go directly to their desk. So when they walk into the conference and it's about to begin, it's right on time, I have them go straight to their desks, and this is how they practice. On their desks, they begin with sharing a snapshot of their learning. And this is something that in the weeks prior to conferences, I find time in my day to take a snapshot of every child, every student in the midst of their learning. So for example, if they're independently reading and doing an awesome job, if they're reading with a partner and doing an awesome job, if they are really engrossed with a science project, I'll snap a photo of them and then they'll glue it down. They'll write a little caption here, and this is how they start the conference. Once they share the snapshot of learning, my students then introduce the agenda with mom and dad. So you can tailor this to how it works for your students and for your classroom. I've tried a couple of different things, a couple of different agendas in my own classroom. The one thing that I find that definitely works is if I stick to a very generic agenda, very basic agenda. So our agenda is a welcome. I begin by, when all the families are there, hello everyone, my name is Miss Kozerski, welcome to our classroom. And so I give that initial introduction. Once I give that introduction, the students go straight to their seat and they start right away with that snapshot of learning. Once students are really understanding what they're going to say and what they're going to talk about with the snapshot of their learning, that's going to really build their confidence, and that's going to really help them get warmed up and get started. Once they have talked about their snapshot of learning, they then move into the different academic rotations. So kind of like how I showed you the different activities, whether they want to share their book nooks for reading with mom and dad, their science project, their writing project, what we're doing for science or social studies, that's up to them. I give them ideas of, here are some things you might want to share. Here's some of the projects. Look at the bulletin boards, anchor charts that we have. But ultimately, I want them to have the choice of what they share and talk about with mom and dad. And then last but not least, behavior or goal setting. I call it the goal setting station, where they come and they share, talk about on that self-reflection, some of the things that they want to work on for the next quarter. Once you have practiced all this format with your students, you are then ready, for my opinion, which is, in my opinion, the best part about this, you're then ready for the real deal, and you are ready to celebrate learning. You are ready for the actual conference. You have planned, you have prepped, your students know what to do, you know what to do, you are ready for student-led conferences. Last but not least is to gather feedback after you have had your student-led conferences. And I know that this is one thing that, at least in my experience, I tend to just kind of forget about, or I I'm just so happy that, it went well. And in my mind, it went great, and it's over. And I just kind of forget that self-reflection piece and gathering feedback piece, which as a teacher, it's really important for us to keep on growing as in our practice. So one thing that when I first started implementing this in 2015, that I really was kind of afraid to do, actually, I'll be honest, was to gather some feedback from the families. And I sent home I sent home a reflection or a feedback form for my parents. And then I also had my students fill out a reflection and a feedback form for how they thought it went. And again, this is something that I'm going to share more in my second video about the results of how those came back and what they thought. But what I did find out is that overall, every parent loved it. They saw the value in their child taking ownership over their behavior, their academics, and ultimately their learning. Some of the feedback that I got was this: I see my child in a whole nother light. I see what my child does at school from a whole different perspective. So much more than just that short snapshot of what they would get in a traditional 10-minute parent-teacher conference. So today, I hope I have inspired you to think a little bit outside the box with possibly implementing a student-led conference approach in your own primary classroom. In my next video, I'm going to pinpoint some of those questions that you might have specifically about, things that you're worried about or wondering about if you are wanting to try this approach in your own classroom. So stay tuned for that next video. And in the meantime, if you do have questions for me about this format and how to use this format in your own classroom, please do not hesitate to contact me, reach out to me, message me, send me an email. Let me know what your questions are, and I'd be happy to address them in the next video. And then also in the meantime, if you are interested in some of the resources that you have seen me feature in this video, I will put the link to those below. Thank you so much.